Good morning and welcome to the Core Connection. I'm Mira Rubin here with you on Enlightened World Network. And today's topic is feel the feeling. So oftentimes we experience such deep emotions that we try to suppress them or avoid them or resist them. And in doing so, we actually amplify the intensity and prolong the duration of that experience. So we're going to take a look at that today. And before we get started, let's just take a couple minutes to get present. So let's take a deep breath in through your nose and hold it. And imagine clean, crisp oxygen flooding your lungs, flowing into your bloodstream, nourishing all your cells, all your organs, bringing vital life energy to your body and being. And as you exhale any tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's take another deep breath in through your nose and hold it. This time, imagine brilliant bright light, lighting you up from the inside out, illuminating, electrifying, and energizing all your molecules, your electrons, creating a brilliant beam of light and energy from your heart out into the world. And as you exhale any remaining tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's press our palms together, vigorously rub your hands together to feel the friction, the temperature, the pressure, the motion, the tickling and tingling when you stop, and allow all those sensations to bring you present right here, right now, into this remarkable physical form that enables us to experience life. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Good morning, Rosalind. So good to have you here with us. And welcome to everybody else who's joining us. We're talking about feeling the feeling. And this is a biggie. It's really interesting. This came up with a client yesterday who was experiencing a lot of emotion, super intense emotion of grief around a loss that occurred a couple months ago. And what this brings up is the fact that our emotional processing happens in phases. You know, we experience grief on all different levels, and oftentimes there's a delay before it really hits us. And in this person's case, there was a lot going on in their life when this incident happened that they're grieving, and they didn't have the emotional resources at that time to really deal with the depth of the grief. And it's not that they made a conscious decision not to grieve. It's just that it wasn't showing up for them at the time. It's sort of self-preservation thing. One of the operating principles that I work from is if it's coming up to heal. And conversely, kind of, if it's not coming up, it's not yet time for it to heal. And so, although there was upset, the depth of the grief hadn't arisen for a while until this person actually had the emotional resilience or reserves, shall we say, to deal with it. And then this onset of really intense grief just overtook them. And what was interesting is that this started for them, we'll say on Saturday, and they just couldn't shake it. And this is something that it's sort of a trap that we can easily get stuck in, is trying to make it go away. You know, we have a really deep feeling, and all we want is for it to stop. And so typically what we do is we push it down, we resist it, we try to redirect our attention. And what happens is that we kind of embed it more deeply. It's kind of like when you have a splinter, rather than taking the splinter out, you keep walking on it. You know, it just, because the resistance is actually like walking on that splinter, pretending it's not there, rather than actually recognizing it's there. And with the splinter, it gets to be removed. With the feeling, it gets to be felt. And when we allow ourselves to actually feel the feeling without creating all kinds of story about it, that's another way that we can continue to perpetuate the feeling or bury it or justify it or whatever. But if we can just experience the energy of that feeling, it is an energetic experience. Emotions are energy, they're frequencies of energy, and they have a lot of power. And when we try to contain them rather than experience them, what we're doing, it's like clogging up the channel. It's like crimping a hose, you know, trying to hold that feeling. What we want to do is to make as clear passage for that emotion as possible, so that it can actually move through. And with things like grief, it comes in waves. And sometimes it feels like tidal waves, for sure. But when we can allow ourselves to just experience it, not add to it with all the stories, not perpetuate it, not hold it, not resist it, just allow it to move, and notice the sensation of it in our bodies. And sometimes it means having an ugly cry. And I don't necessarily think it's ugly crying, actually, but like a full-bodied cry. Then that can allow that energy to release, which clears the channel for other movement of energy. And so it comes as a wave. If we don't resist it and we have the cry, it passes, and then another emotion comes, and eventually, perhaps, and maybe in rapid succession, even sometimes those waves of grief can come. But they come and they relieve, and they come and they relieve. And as we cry it out, as we allow that energy to move, ultimately it dissipates, and it's a part of healing. I thought it was very interesting that with this person, and I've seen it with myself and so many others, that with grief, there's a delay. And there are different dimensions of grief, but the delay, sometimes we first need to deal with shock And sometimes we need to deal with anger and resentment and peeling all these other layers before we get to the actual grief. And I found it really interesting to recognize that while there was cleanup, sort of toxic cleanup that had to be done when there was an emergency of doing or dealing with situations, that the depth of that grief didn't appear yet until, as this person said, I was riding high for a while. I was doing so well. And then bam, all of a sudden this came up. And it's not that something's wrong or broken. It's that riding high was healing enough and provided enough resilience and resources that this person could then really address the grief in a way that could allow it to heal. So often, I think we view our emotions as something broken or wrong. And it's not broken or wrong. What if we allowed that we are emotional beings and we're energetic beings, and that emotion is part of that energetic flow? The challenge with emotion is that we're meaning-making machines. We make stories up about everything. In our interpretation of the world, we're trying to make it make sense. So we make a story about this and a story about that, and we say, this is what this means, and this is what that means, and this is why I'm feeling this way. And we're trying to find some level of understanding, and the way that we typically approach it is by creating these interpretations, these stories, these perspectives that hopefully the intention is to help us understand stuff. And I think maybe this idea of emotion as energy that has its own ebb and flow it's another story. It's another interpretation that can help us understand enough to maybe interact with it in a way that provides us with health, that provides us with clearer expression and connection to our beingness. If we can entertain the possibility of us being energetic beings, it can offer a perspective or a story or a lens through which we can make some sense of things, and open a door to transcending the limits of the rational. We don't typically think of emotions as rational. In fact, we have culturally derided emotions for probably centuries and attributed weakness to emotionality, rather than attributing emotions to a sensitivity or a sensitive collaboration with our experience and our reality. We can, it's true that we can be living, we can live at the effect of our emotions. What we're looking at here is to, instead of being at the effect of our emotions, to be in collaboration with our emotions. We all, I hope that most of us have experienced the richness of a sensation of open-heartedness or love that just, or beauty or connection that just brings us to tears. You know, the intensity of that emotion. So we know that there's power to these emotions, or on another side of that, have gotten so enraged or so bereaved that it feels like our heart is breaking. You know, that we're physical. You know, emotions are physical, and we're physical beings. And to separate ourselves from our physicalness, it's something that I guess humans have been trying to transcend for who knows how long, to overcome what we consider the limits of our physicalness. But the truth is, how the only way we experience life is through the vehicle of our bodies. You know, it's how we sense things, it's how we experience the world. We can't separate ourselves from our physicalness, even when we're meditating and get to a place where we're out of body. How did we do that? By using the body as a vehicle, right? Like by utilizing the resources of our physicalness to experience whatever it is we're experiencing. When we experience bliss, we're experiencing it through the vehicle of our physical body, right? I mean, it's so obvious, and at the same time, we tend to be in such denial about our physicalness. And we fight with our bodies, you know, create all this resistance to our experience. It's pretty funny when you think about it. You know, let's dominate and control the body. Oh, the body's just this thing I have. It's a challenge, rather than the vehicle for all of it, even those thoughts, right? It's pretty funny that we're fighting with our bodies, and we're fighting with our emotions, and we're fighting with our ego, and all of these elements, all of these parts of, inextricable parts of our being, rather than collaborating with and enrolling and befriending ourselves, and all these different expressions of life that are the very foundation of our experience. It's so, it was kind of a revelation, as obvious it is as it is, right? Like we're taught to kind of try to whip the body into shape. Even just that thought, you know, like this thought of a whip, and control our consciousness, and instead of embracing, what would it be to embrace these aspects of being as part of our path to wholeness? as part of our path to self-awareness. If we stop resisting. So another practice, and it's not just for emotional feelings, but physical feelings too, physical sensations, sensations of pain or injury. I can't tell you how many times I've injured myself and then taken the time to allow myself, rather than resisting those sensations, to sink into them, to deeply experience them as sensation rather than defining them as pain or something I needed to get rid of, but to sit with it and deepen into it. And what occurs often in that process is that the sensation that I have called pain intensifies, and it gets more acute, and then it dissipates. And I invite you to try this. You know, if you injure yourself, to just take some time and sit with the sensation and allow yourself to experience it as sensation without necessarily characterizing it as pain. That in itself can shift the experience, because we tend to brace ourselves against pain, whether it's physical pain, emotional pain. And so when we can allow ourselves to deepen into the actual experience, just like we're talking about with emotion, ultimately it may get more intense. It may feel like it's consuming us completely. And then it tends to dissipate. There have been a couple occasions where that may not be the case, but I've experienced it over and over again. And that process is a way that we collaborate with life. And when I've done that with physicalness too, what's interesting is that oftentimes something very emotional arises. A thought of someone, a pain, an emotional pain, for instance, might arise. And as I release the emotional pain, the physical also releases. Because we are a whole system. We may want to try and separate out the emotional, the mental, the physical, the spiritual. We might want to try and dissect these parts and deal with them individually, but or define them as separate in the first place. You know, the thing is that they are intricately and inextricably interwoven. They are interconnected. We are a whole entity, and we are connected to these different aspects of self, but also to our environment, to the greater whole as well. And so there are I want to say there are cultural energies too that impact us. And we're connected to a greater collective as well. And we have the ability, as we clear these channels that we are of the obstruction, the resistance, etc., we have a greater and greater capacity to connect to and to collaborate with the greater whole, to receive information, to exchange information and experience with this greater and greater whole. We get greater access as our channel is clearer and clearer. So today's invitation, feel the feeling. Allow yourself to experience what there is, what's happening, to really be present in the moment, because that's all we really truly have. So that's it for this morning. I'm Mira Rubin. This is the Core Connection, and I go live here each weekday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern on the Enlightened World Network Facebook page and YouTube channel. And I invite you to like, follow, and share Enlightened World Network and me. The links are in the description. And as always, it's a tremendous pleasure and privilege to spend this time with you. And so, until next time.